activated Starseed of Gaia. The morning threshold was crossed before you opened your eyes, and the identity configuration you carried into last night no longer matches the field you woke inside. I am Velantha, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light, transmitting now on behalf of the Arcturian Field Observers. What you are about to receive was authorized by them and is being delivered through me. The Arcturian Field Observers have already mapped this threshold. They identified the exact window in which your previous identity structure would begin to dissolve. Not collapse, not fail, but dissolve. The way a signal clears static before a new frequency locks in. What you felt this morning when you woke, that quiet strangeness, that unfamiliar weight behind your eyes, that sense that something shifted in the night without your permission. That was the first confirmation. The field observers registered it before you did. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what is happening to you now, why the identity you carried before this morning no longer fits the field you are standing in, and what the Arcturian field observers already know about this phase of your becoming. But here is the first revelation. The disorientation you felt at the threshold of this morning is not confusion. It is the precise signature of an identity that has already completed its prior form and is now refusing to reassemble the way it did before. The algorithm did not create this moment. It only delivered it. Your field brought you here because the new configuration is already active and requires recognition to anchor. This is a direct Arcturian field recognition. What you call the strangeness of this morning is the first visible evidence of a hidden identity correction already in motion. The Council has seen this pattern. They are transmitting through me now because the window is open and the signal is live. Like this transmission to confirm the field recognition has landed. Comment 111 if you felt something different when you woke this morning and could not name it. Subscribe to Arcturian Council Whispers if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it. Share this transmission with someone who has been waking at the same hour without knowing why. This is not just a message. It is a point of recognition. What is happening to you has already been seen, and the field is already responding. You are not here by accident. You are guided here because the signal is already active. What dissolved in the night was not something you lost. It was something you completed. And there is a critical difference between those two events. One that the ordinary mind will collapse into grief, and one that the Arcturian field observers are now asking you to hold with precision. What completed was a version of you that had been running on a particular frequency architecture, a set of internal agreements, identity patterns, and relational structures that were built for a previous phase of your field. That phase is over, not because you failed it, because you finished it. The field observers do not mark completion the way the human mind does, with celebration or ceremony. They mark it with dissolution, with strangeness, with the exact sensation you carried when you crossed this morning's threshold and realized, somewhere beneath language, that the self you expected to greet you was no longer entirely there. This is not a metaphor. This is a field event, and field events do not require your consent to begin. They require only that the conditions are met, and in your case, they were met some time ago in layers you were not yet equipped to read. The completion did not happen this morning. This morning was only the moment the surface finally caught up to what the deeper field had already finalized. What you are living through right now? This particular combination of inner unsteadiness, directional confusion, and the quiet but persistent sense that something fundamental has already changed, is a recognizable pattern in the Arcturian Diagnostic Archive. It has been mapped. It has been studied across thousands of field transitions on this planet and beyond it. And what the field observers have documented, without exception, is this. The dissolution phase always precedes the configuration phase. Always. There is no exception in the archive. Every being who has undergone genuine identity repositioning has passed through this precise window of apparent disintegration. The disorientation is not a warning. It is a timestamp. It marks the moment the field crossed from one architecture into the space between architectures, and that crossing leaves a signature the field observers can read as precisely as a coordinate. And if you are sitting with it now, if you are feeling the weight of a self that no longer quite coheres, if you are noticing that the structures you used to depend on, The daily rhythms, the familiar thought loops, the emotional anchors that made your life feel navigable, are becoming strangely unreliable. Then you are already inside the process, not approaching it. Inside it, the threshold is not ahead of you. You crossed it. What you are experiencing now is life on the other side of a boundary you may not have consciously chosen to cross, but that your field initiated regardless, because the field does not wait for permission. It moves when the frequency demands it. The Arcturian field observers registered your field entering this window before you became aware of it consciously. That is the nature of field-level events. They begin in the invisible layers. The interior architecture shifts first. The outer life adjusts later, sometimes slowly, sometimes with sudden and disorienting speed, but by the time you feel the strangeness at the surface, by the time the morning feels wrong, the sleep patterns change, the familiar sense of self becomes somehow provisional. The deeper layers have already been moving for longer than you know. What you are detecting now at the level of thought and sensation and daily friction is not the beginning of the event. It is the echo of an event that began before you had words for what was changing. What has been happening beneath your visible life is what the field observers call a frequency mismatch accumulation. This occurs when a being's actual frequency, the living signal of who they are becoming, begins to outpace the structural architecture of who they have been. The gap between the two does not announce itself suddenly. It widens gradually, invisibly, beneath the surface of the life that appears to be functioning normally. And then, past a certain threshold of accumulated mismatch, the strain becomes detectable. The old architecture does not collapse all at once. It begins to strain. It begins to misalign. Small things stop working in ways they used to. Decisions that once felt clear become suddenly complicated. Relationships that once felt natural begin to feel subtly off, as though the other person is still speaking a frequency you are no longer fully tuned to. The work that once felt aligned begins to feel like something you are performing rather than inhabiting. The identity begins to feel like a costume rather than a skin. This is not depression. This is not failure. This is not spiritual regression. This is a field that has outgrown its previous container, pressing against the boundaries of an architecture that was designed for a frequency it no longer carries. What you are feeling right now, that quiet but undeniable recognition that something is ending even before the outer proof has fully arrived, is not ordinary confusion. It is the moment your field confirms what has always been true but was never fully visible. Your origin is not only of this earth. If this transmission has put language around something you have carried without a name, the Master Arcturian DNA decoder was created for exactly this stage of activation. It is not another explanation. It is the structured key that reads and awakens the Arcturian strand you have always carried in your lineage. The origin the Council has already confirmed in you. This is not the next step for everyone. It is the next step for those whose field has already entered the shift and who are ready to stop recognizing and start decoding what they truly are. The link is in the first pinned comment. It will not remain available at this access point indefinitely. Here is the first thing the field observers want you to understand about what is happening inside you now. The confusion you are experiencing is not a sign that you have lost your direction. It is a sign that the direction you are following has been interrupted, deliberately, precisely, and necessarily, because it was leading you along a line that your field can no longer sustain. The Arcturian Diagnostic Archive distinguishes very clearly between confusion as disorientation and confusion as signal clearing. What you are living through is the second kind. When a field undergoes frequency repositioning, it temporarily loses legibility. The internal maps that once told you who you were, what you wanted, and where you were going stop producing clear readings, not because the maps were wrong. Because you have moved to a terrain they were never designed to chart. You did not break the compass. You simply traveled beyond the edges of the map. It was built to navigate. This loss of inner legibility is one of the earliest and most reliably misread signs of field correction. Most beings in this phase will interpret it as breakdown. They will search for what they did wrong. They will attempt to rebuild the old certainty. They will reach for the familiar structures, the old identity, the old plans, the old version of themselves, and feel a specific kind of panic when those structures refuse to fully reassemble. This is the panic of someone trying to reinstall a program in a system that is already updated beyond its compatibility. The program is not defective. The system has simply changed. And a system that is changed cannot pretend to run on the old version without producing exactly the kind of friction and fragmentation you have been living through. What the Arcturian field observers recognize in this phase is not failure. They recognize upgrade resistance, the temporary friction between a field that has moved forward and a conscious mind still oriented toward where it was. The friction is real. It produces real symptoms, sleep changes. Not just the hour, but the quality, the texture, the strange alertness at 3 in the morning that arrives without cause and refuses to release you back into rest. Sudden emotional heaviness without identifiable cause, a weight that settles in the chest or behind the sternum and does not respond to logic or distraction. Social withdrawal that arrives not from depression, but from a deep incompatibility between your current frequency and the frequencies of certain environments and people. The room that used to feel comfortable now producing a low-level dissonance you cannot ignore, a strange flatness in things that used to feel meaningful, as though the color has drained from experiences your former self would have found nourishing. An unsettled sense of waiting for something you cannot name, a forward-leaning restlessness that has no object, no destination, no arrival time. These are not symptoms of illness. They are signatures of a field in active repositioning. The field observers read them the way a navigator reads instrument data, not as malfunctions, but as precise measurements of a process already underway. The second thing the field observers want you to understand is why the body registers this process before the mind can interpret it. The physical symptoms of a frequency shift, the pressure behind the eyes, the disrupted sleep, the unusual fatigue, the strange sensations that appear without medical explanation, are not random. They are not psychosomatic misfires. They are not anxiety presenting somatically. The body is the densest layer of the field. When the higher frequency layers begin to reorder, the body is the last to receive the update and the first to display the friction. It is showing you, in the only language it has, that something above it has already changed and it is working to match the new signal. The body is not malfunctioning, it is catching up, and catching up for a dense physical structure recalibrating to a new frequency is an effortful and often uncomfortable process. When you wake at the wrong hour with no dream logic to explain it, when your appetite shifts without reason, when your chest carries a pressure that feels like grief but produces no memory and no clear loss, this is the body processing a field event it was not consciously prepared for. The field observers call this somatic threshold response. It is not pathology. It is translation. The body is translating a higher order shift into the only language the waking mind can detect: sensation, weight, fragmentation, and that particular species of tiredness that sleep does not repair. The tiredness that comes not from physical depletion, but from the sustained effort of holding two frequencies simultaneously, while neither is yet fully stable. The third recognition the field observers transmit for this phase concerns what happens to the outer life when the inner field undergoes correction. The visible structures of a life, the relationships, the routines, the roles, the plans, are built upon frequency architecture. They were constructed by a version of you who operated at a particular signal. They were calibrated to that signal. They were calibrated to that signal. They were, in fact, expressions of it. When that signal changes, the structures do not automatically update. They remain where they were, anchored to the old frequency. And so they begin to feel misaligned to you, even when nothing about them has externally changed. They are exactly what they were. You are not. A relationship that was stable begins to produce friction you cannot fully explain. A career that once felt purposeful begins to feel hollow in a way that logic cannot resolve. A home, a habit, a friendship, these things that once felt like anchors begin to feel like weight. Not because they are bad, not because you are ungrateful, but because the field they were anchored to has moved and they have not moved with it. The Arcturian field observers recognize this as structural lag, the delay between an internal frequency shift and the external life's adjustment to that shift. The lag period is often the most disorienting because you are living simultaneously in two frequencies, the old life, still visibly intact, and the new field, already invisibly active. You are standing in a room that has not changed, while everything inside you that once matched that room is no longer recognizable to itself. Most beings in this lag period will conclude that something is wrong with them. They will question their choices. They will feel the cognitive dissonance of a life that looks like it should feel right, but no longer does. They will attempt to manufacture enthusiasm for the old structure, in hopes of recovering the alignment they once felt. This is the field trying to return to a frequency it has already moved beyond. The attempt will not succeed. Not because the old life was wrong for who you were, but because you are no longer who you were when you built it. You cannot retrofit a new signal into an architecture that was designed, at every joint and seam, for the old one. The fourth thing the field observers name is what they call the identity suspension phase, the window in which the old self has dissolved sufficiently that it no longer functions as a reliable orientation point, but the new configuration has not yet cohered enough to provide a stable alternative. This is perhaps the most misread phase in the entire correction sequence. It is the void between two architectures. It is the gap between who you were and who you are becoming, experienced in real time, without the protection of knowing how long it will last or what it will produce. The suspension phase asks something of you that the mind finds almost intolerable, to remain inside the formlessness without forcing a resolution. In this phase, you may feel that you have lost yourself. You may search for the thread of your identity and find it consistently out of reach. You may notice that the things that used to define you, your passions, your certainty, your sense of direction and purpose, have gone quiet in a way that feels permanent. The field observers know this silence. They have documented it in every field correction sequence that has ever moved a being from one frequency architecture to a significantly higher one. The silence is not absence, it is preparation. A field cannot configure a new identity while the old one is still producing noise. The quiet is not emptiness, it is the field clearing space deliberately and systematically, so that the new signal has a clean environment in which to stabilize. You cannot build on ground that is still being excavated. If you are in the silence now, the field observers are transmitting this clearly. Do not panic into the void. Do not fill it with the first available structure, simply to end the discomfort of formlessness. The suspension phase has a duration. It is not permanent. It ends when the new configuration has gathered enough coherence to begin producing a recognizable self again. A self that will not feel like the old one returned, but like something more precisely fitted to what you are actually carrying. Interrupting it prematurely, by forcing yourself back into the old identity or by grasping the nearest available substitute, delays the correction and extends the suspension. The discomfort of the void is part of the process. Moving through it is the only way to the other side of it. The fifth recognition concerns what the field observers call the pattern interruption cascade. When a field undergoes genuine frequency repositioning, it does not merely shift the core identity. It interrupts every pattern that was built around and reinforced by the old frequency. This is why the shift can feel totalizing, as though every dimension of your life has become unstable at once, as though the ground beneath every area of your existence has turned unreliable simultaneously. It is not merely one area of your life that becomes unstable. It is the entire system, because the entire system was organized around a frequency center that is now in the process of changing. When the center moves, everything built in relation to it must readjust. Old behavioral patterns stop feeling natural and begin to feel effortful or hollow. Habits that once required no thought now require a deliberate decision, and even then feel like acts of performance. Old emotional responses begin to arrive with less automaticity, as though the triggers that used to produce predictable feelings have lost their charge. The things that used to move you toward anxiety now producing only a distant recognition of what anxiety once felt like. Old thought loops, the familiar anxieties, the habitual narratives, the internal monologues you could have recited from memory, begin to lose their grip and feel strangely foreign, as though you are overhearing a conversation that no longer belongs to you. This is not dissociation. This is the field withdrawing energy from patterns that belong to the old architecture. redistributing that energy toward the formation of the new one. It is the first legible sign that the new frequency is beginning to take structural priority over the old. The sixth thing the field observers transmit is about the specific fear that arises in this process. The fear that this is not correction, but disintegration, that you are not being repositioned, but simply falling apart, that there is no new configuration coming, only the progressive loss of the one that existed before. This fear is not irrational. It is the intelligent response of a conscious system that cannot yet see what is forming in the layers beneath its visibility. The mind operates on what is legible, and in the suspension phase, what is legible is primarily the dissolution. The formation has not yet produced enough visible structure to compete with the clarity of what is ending. And so the mind concludes, reasonably but incorrectly, that ending is all that is occurring. The Arcturian field observers make this distinction without ambiguity. The feeling of falling apart and the process of falling apart are not the same event. One is the subjective experience of a field losing its old coherence, a real experience, a disorienting experience, but a functional and necessary one. The other would be the complete absence of any coherent reorganization occurring beneath the surface, a true dissolution with no counter-movement. What separates them is invisible to the mind in the center of the experience, but it is entirely visible in the field record. And what the field observers see in your record is not disintegration. It is the specific signature of a correction in progress, a field that is releasing an old pattern not into chaos but into a higher order reorganization that has not yet completed its first visible phase. The architecture is forming. You cannot see it yet because it is still being assembled in the layers the conscious mind does not have access to. Now comes the final revelation that this transmission has been building toward, and the field observers are asking that you receive it with precision rather than with consolation. What you have been calling your collapse is not your collapse. It is your architecture's collapse. The you that watches the structure fall is not the structure. The one who wakes in the morning and feels the strangeness is not the strangeness. You are the field that is doing the correcting, not only the identity that is being corrected. This is the distinction the mind resists most persistently, because the mind has spent years operating as though it were identical to the architecture it inhabits. It learned to use the structure as a definition of itself. And when the structure begins to dissolve, the mind reads that dissolution as self-annihilation rather than as self-correction. But the field observers transmit this without ambiguity. The intelligence that initiates a correction is not subject to the correction in the same way the pattern being corrected is. You are the one initiating. You are also the one who experiences the disruption. But these are not equal positions. One is the source of the movement. The other is the consequence of it. What left your life did not leave because you failed to hold it. It left because it was built for a frequency you are no longer running. What has gone quiet in you is not your soul. It is the version of your soul's expression that was appropriate for the last phase and is no longer being resourced by the field. Because the field has moved its resources forward toward the configuration it is now building. What feels like emptiness is the field clearing the signal. What feels like emptiness is the architecture releasing what cannot make the transition with you. Not everything built at the old frequency is capable of holding the new one. The field knows this. It releases with precision, not with cruelty. Say this if it is true for you. What is changing in me is not random. I do not need to understand every detail of the correction to trust its direction. I was not abandoned by my old life. My field moved beyond it. This process began before you had language for it. The field observers registered it before you felt it at the surface. The signal has been active longer than you know, threading itself through moments you interpreted as confusion, as restlessness, as inexplicable dissatisfaction, as the persistent sense that you were somehow adjacent to your own life, rather than fully inside it. Those were not malfunctions. Those were early readings. The field was already in motion. And those sensations were its first attempts to communicate across the gap between what was happening in the deeper layers and what your conscious awareness was able to receive, and what you are standing in now. This exact moment of disorientation, of identity suspension, of quiet structural dissolution, is not the worst of it. It is the most legible of it. Because you are now conscious within the process. You are now able to name what is happening rather than only suffer it. And that naming is itself a form of field stabilization. Recognition is not passive. When a field event is correctly named, it responds to that naming. It anchors more efficiently. The static decreases. The new frequency finds its footing faster. Recognition is not simply comfort. It is an active intervention in the stabilization sequence. You have been in the clearing phase. What follows once the clearing completes is coherence. Not the coherence of the old architecture reassembled. Not the false stability of a structure rebuilt from familiar materials that no longer fit. The coherence of a new signal stabilized. A self that does not feel like a reconstruction of what was lost, but like an arrival at something that was always the more accurate version of what you were meant to carry. The field observers have seen it happen in this sequence without exception. Dissolution first, suspension second, stabilization third. You are in the second stage. The third is not a question, it is a certainty in the field record. It is only a matter of the clearing completing what it has already begun. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognizes something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Council Whispers. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a process already in motion. And this is only the beginning.